one of the components of aging for some of us, forms of dementia. We view that in terms of capacities, and the loss of capacities or productivity and physical energy is considered to be reason to get out of the way. You're in our way. And some of the discussions around medical care and so forth sometimes even fall into that track. Why should we be paid for people who are elderly and so forth? Of course, that's done by people who aren't yet elderly. But aging takes place in such rapid succession. John Hill and I were talking just a moment ago. Where do the years go? How quickly the years have passed since I was here. When I come back, it always seems like, maybe 5 years. But 1988, and how we change over those times. This video I want you to see is aging captured in the video of one person. And the video is made from still photos of this same person at different ages in her life. As you look at this very short, I think it's 3 minutes or so? It's aging in 3 minutes. It feels like I've aged in about 3 minutes. Focus on the changes that take place. When was this person happiest? When do you see the most joy in this person? Or the most sense of peace and serenity and fulfillment? So just watch this and we'll talk about it in a minute. be that you need to see this several times to catch it, but what's your impression of this person's life in terms of her beauty, her sense of serenity or happiness? Get any impression? You watch her eyes. How many of you think it was when she was the youngest? What about when she was old? What made you think about her when she was old? That she was.
Her eyes showed joy.
Yeah, do you see the kind of a joy in her eyes? Even the wrinkles around her eyes seem to accent a kind of a light in her eyes. I chose this because I think it does illustrate that did you see that she was less beautiful when she was old than when she was young? There were more wrinkles, the gray in her hair, but there was this kind of an inherent beauty and the consistency of her personhood. Even her expressions remained basically the same. You never saw her smile. That may have been, but her identity stayed intact, and you could see it in her eyes. And I think if we were to watch it several times, we could almost watch her eyes go from visions of expectancy, a little fear, wonderment, to a sense of peace, a sense of serenity, fulfillment. And I would hope that can be more of an attitude toward our own aging. We often see it as a series of losses, as we've said, that we're burdened, that there is isolation, that time is running out. And I know I have that sense. You know, I realize that in 10 years, I'll be 86. 20 years, 96. If I live 25 years, over 100. If I make it to 100, then I can say, I'm 100 and a half. A sense of time running out. John Swinton, that I mentioned before, in his book, mentioned Living in the Memories of God, has also done a recent book on the theology of time, in which he talks about discipleship, Christian discipleship being living in the present, living in the moment. That God's sense of time is the intensity of time. It's kairos time, not merely chronological time. And John also says, and I call him John, he's my friend. I did meet him, but he wouldn't remember that. But he says people with dementia, for example, in severe dementia, don't lose their sense of time. They lose their tense of time. That is, past and future, present tense. And getting into their present tense is precisely the goal of those who live with such persons. We'll talk about that a little more later. But to see aging not merely through a kind of a medical lens of where we look at symptoms and physiological and cognitive losses and even relational losses, to see it through a different lens. It's presumptuous to say to see it through the lens that God sees. But that's what theology is, in a sense, to try to see the world and ourselves the way God sees us, the way God intends for us. And so what does it mean to age from the perspective of three of our basic Christian doctrines or affirmations? The doctrine of creation, the doctrine of incarnation, and the doctrine of the image of God, or the imago Dei. First of all, what does it mean to view aging? Through our understanding of God being the creator of all that is, of God bringing creation into being, and God being the source of all life. What does it mean to affirm? And God creating and called it good. What does it mean to see God through the lens of the biblical theological understanding of creation? There are two traditional readings of Genesis 1 through 3. The stories of creation and the fall in the book of Genesis. We are most familiar in the West with only one of those traditions, predominantly. And I want us to look at both, but I particularly want us to see that there's another way of viewing than the one we've often viewed creation. One is what is originated basically in St. Augustine, influential in Western Christianity in particular. In that particular understanding of creation, creation originally was good, meaning perfect. Everything was perfect. There was no natural evil. There were no hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes and cancer. Everything was perfect, good. There neither were there any challenges. It's just living this perfect existence. Adam and Eve, in the story, or man and woman, humanity, is charged with maintaining that perfection. With me so far? God created everything perfect, including human beings. And your responsibility is to maintain the perfection, maintain the goodness. The fall corrupted the whole creation, and the punishment or consequences was both physical death, mortality, and spiritual death, or what came to be known in theological circles, especially among the Calvinists, as total depravity. We lost all of our innocence, our goodness, and the whole creation was corrupted. The ground brought forth thorns and thistles. We had to work by the sweat of our brow. Their alienation occurred. Violence occurred. All because human beings made their own choice and moved away from the perfection, didn't maintain the perfection. Now, God intervenes in the Augustinian and saves us by calling a covenant people and through Jesus Christ. Now that's one way, and I'm oversimplifying these two views. But I'm trying to make the point of there's another way to view it. And that's the Irenaean, traced to Irenaeus. It's more influential in the Eastern Christianity, among Orthodox Christians, for example, the Eastern Orthodox communities. The earth was created as, quote, a veil for soul making, so that creation came into being by God to be a context for making human beings in the image of God, to where they could fulfill the image of God. It contained everything needed to support life and goodness. It was created with abundance, beauty, goodness, truth, love. It was all there from the very beginning. God brought that into being. But there were also challenges within creation. And those challenges were for the purpose of provoking growth, helping us grow. You still with me? Not as punishment, but as means of maturing into the likeness of God. Adam and Eve were created as innocent more than guilty or perfect. That makes sense? Difference between the innocence of a child and the perfection of a child. I know our kids, we think they're, our grandkids are perfect. We didn't think that necessarily about kids all the time. But they were innocent. And in order for them to grow, there were challenges. And if you protect them from all of the challenges, like making sure they don't fall while they're learning to walk, they won't learn to walk. So that the challenges are there to help mature, grow. The fall resulted from being foolishly misled into assuming they could grow into God's likeness, immortality, without remaining rooted in God. Now, I think there is the likeness, well, I'll say that a little more later, about the chaos. The chaos that existed. Creation came into being. God's Spirit moved over the watery chaos. So the creation, I ought to say this in Oak Ridge, God was an engineer. God separated light from darkness, water from dry land, and rearranged. It was creation not out of nothing, but out of chaos. And that'll be important a little later too. The natural result was not punishment. It was separation from God. And that's spiritual death. It means an inability to develop holy character and a weakening of human capacities. The goal of salvation in the Irenaean understanding is to fulfill God's intention for humanity, the development of full likeness of God, which is an eternal journey. Now, both of these elements, this element is in both approaches, but in the Eastern, God is present in creation as one who is empowering creation, rather than just the sovereignty over creation as though God's the potentate, or the God who creates in the deist concept, creates things and then says, okay, let it run. God is present within the creation. empowering creation, including human beings. And human beings are empowered to grow into the likeness of God as they confront the challenges, always rooted in God. Still with me? Always stay aware of who God is, where God is, and what God wants of us. So that God is not causing things to happen to us. He created a world in which things happen that are chaotic. But God is ever present in the midst of those, bringing order, bringing life, bringing new life. Another way to view it that I think is built, it has a lot of roots in the Irenaean, but that's in, if you're familiar with process theology, that God is in the midst of the processes, and everything is in process. Am I getting too abstract? Am I losing? You still awake? Okay. Some of you are. I may be losing myself. That that everything is in process. Nothing is static. Boy, Oak Ridge isn't static, even. It's changed since 1988. I thought, here I go chasing a rabbit, but driving in, when did Centrifuge Street come into view? I thought only in Oak Ridge would you name a street. But I think it's appropriate street. Well, in Genesis 1:2, the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. God spoke, and creation came into being by order, by change. Order from chaos, light from darkness, life from death. And in the Christian tradition, Paul picks up on this image of creation and says that in Adam, all creation got corrupted, but God brought a new Adam, Jesus, who gives us a new creation. So that Paul says, if anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. The old has passed away. The new has come. Everything is different. So that God is forever making things new, working for good, working to bring together that which is broken, working to bring meaning, beauty, goodness, life, love, out of the world's chaos. Now, what's the implication for our age? All of life, in its complexity and mystery, is a profound gift from God. DeLange, again, says that the first step toward loving life is to see life as a gift. And to do consciously acknowledge that life is a gift. We don't create it. We're not self-created. Life is given to us undeservedly. And therefore, the appropriate response is to clasp it with love. Not grasp it to hold on to, but to love. To live in response to the gift. Aging is a part of the ongoing process of creation. All of life goes through cycles. Now, I learned this my first week. If you use something scientific, you better check it out. Ben St. Clair warned me of that. Ben St. Clair said he made a statement in a sermon one time here that nature abhors a vacuum. He got a 2.5-page single-spaced letter saying there's no such thing as a vacuum in nature. And Ben said, I didn't understand any of it. But all multi-celled beings go through cycles, don't they? Birth, division, and then die. But in a sense, nothing ever dies. I remember Phil Baker? Phil was down, you remember he used to help us set up worship, and he was kind of the maintenance man around here for a while. He was we were having a baptism that morning, and someone had brought water from the Jordan, and they wanted that water to be mixed in with the water from the faucet, so that the baby would be baptized in the same water that Jesus was baptized in. Well, Phil said, I'm not going to disillusion them. May have been somebody here, I don't know. So, I'm not going to disillusion them, but he said, there's as much likelihood that the atoms in that water out of that fountain was the water that Jesus was baptized with, and this vial of water from the Jordan. Because, was he a physicist? I think he was a physicist one. Said, we're all recycled atoms. And I said, yes, we are recycled ATOMS, and we are all recycled ADAMS. We are recycled atoms and recycled atoms. Everything. And we're a composition of what has been, the atoms that have been. We're a collection of the past. We all go through, everything living goes through cycles. We lost a wonderful tree down here when I was here. And I wrote an essay or whatever it was on a newsletter about an ode to the loss of the oak tree. I think it's an oak tree. That big oak tree died. Everything does. We do too. We do too. Well, suffering, limitations, losses, opportunities, as well as challenges. Although I am not thankful that Linda has her disease, I have been blessed by experiences with Linda in her disease. And we both have grown in many ways. Jean Vanier, the founder of L'Arche community, familiar with L'Arche? The community in which Henry Nouwen lived. It's a community of severely disabled or multi-challenged adults. And someone asked a person who lived in that community, came to live in that community, why do you do this? He says, they make me human. They make me human. They call for things in me that would go undeveloped if I didn't live with them. I feel that way. Okay, creation. Creation's a gift, including aging. We're part of the ongoing life of God's creation. And if God created it, it's good. Or there is potential good at every phase of our lives. And there are opportunities for growth in love, in wisdom, and in spiritual grace. Secondly, the doctrine. Human beings are created in the image of God with inherent worth and dignity. But what is the image of God? Some popular definitions. Rene Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." In other words, the image of God is our rationality, our ability to think, to reason. Well, that won't happen, because we lose our ability to think and reason. Does that mean those who lose their ability to think and reason are less human? Less the image of God? No. That is a devilish notion. But it's prevalent, even in the medical world. As one nurse practitioner said to me in Linda's presence, "Mr. Carter, you have to accept she's gone. She's not the person she used to be." And I said, "You don't have to tell me how she's changed, but you don't know her story. She's not gone. She's still there. And you don't know her unless you know her story. You see her through her, as in terms of her symptoms. So she's just another patient. I see her through her story." It's a problem in the medical field too, and people are seen only in terms of their symptoms. But Descartes' notion is this dualism between soul and body. We're not a dualist. We don't have a soul and a body. We have a soul we have an in-soul body. We have a body that has spirit, and they're intertwined. You can't separate out. We don't even know what the mind is, I've learned. We think we do. There's a researcher at Stanford, I think it's at Stanford, University of Southern California, who is a neurologist devoting his life to the research of the human brain. He says if everything that we need to know about the human brain were equal to 2 miles in length, how much distance do you think we've traveled in knowing? He says, I usually get from medical students and others, 50, we've gone a mile, we've gone 50%. We've gone a quarter of the way. He said, I would say we've grown maybe 3 inches. If you put, and I did this recently, we were having a presentation on the brain with all of its billions of connectors, all of its cells, all of its synapses, all of the circuits that are in the brain, and they were color-coded. I saw that, I said, that looks like a picture from the Hubble telescope. So I got a picture from the Hubble telescope and placed it alongside the picture of the human brain. Try. They look remarkably similar. I conclude our human brains are microcosms of the universe, filled with just as much mystery. And we don't know what the mind is. It's more than the brain. There's muscle memory. Linda's got muscle memory. She moves her mouth to eat. But you tell her, Linda, open your mouth to eat. She doesn't understand the instruction, but you put something on her lip. The muscle remembers. We are our relationships. We don't understand what a human being is. in all of our complexity, our biological and physiological complexity. But what we do know is we are made as creatures in the image of God. And our identity is rooted in God. It is in the one to whom we belong. We are beloved children of God. I don't know what all that means, other than I'm valued, I'm loved, and I'm never given up on. I'm never left alone. That's what it means to be made in the image of God. We have the potential to reflect the character of God. We have the potential to appreciate and create beauty, to know and preserve truth. I'm almost tempted to go off on political concerns here. Don't let us lose the sense that truth matters. Amen. That's what it means to be in the image of God. The ability to apprehend truth and incorporate it into our lives. We have the ability to supremely give and receive love. That is our greatest gift. The ability to receive and give love. Because love is the only thing that lasts. Language passes, knowledge passes. It's right there in the book. 13th chapter, 1 Corinthians. Now abides faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Not knowledge, not energy, not productivity, love. What's the implication? Human worth is rooted in the one to whom we belong, and it is held secure by God and in God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer's great poem, Who Am I?, closes with, Who am I, O God, thou knowest, I am thine. I carry from time to time this, can you see it? Pocket knife. Can you see it very well at all? I probably can't. You know, one handle's off. Only has, part of the handle is gone. It takes an effort to open it because it's kind of rusty. Doesn't move around very much. It obviously doesn't cut. It was made to cut. Got some rust on it. You know you couldn't buy that from it. It wouldn't bring anything in the garage safe. Now why would I value that? Pardon?
Belongs to the past.
It belonged to somebody I love. It belonged to my grandfather. This is my grandfather's pocket knife. Its value isn't in its productivity. You can't produce it longer. Sure doesn't look very good. Its joints are stiff. Finish is falling off. Kind of rusty. It's valuable because of the one to whom it belongs. The most frail of the order. The most helpless is valued because of to whom she or he belongs. Well, I don't know if we need to go into some of these historical ones. Capacities, I am what I can create and produce. Tom Wesley had his own understanding of the image of God. And by the way, John Wesley, Randy Maddox, the foremost Wesleyan scholar, theologian, I should say, says that John Wesley uniquely combines both the Augustinian and the Irenaean tradition. That's one of his great contributions to the history of theology, was that he combined the Augustinian and the Irenaean understanding of the creation and the fall. Human worth is the one to whom we belong. Aging does not threaten the core of who I am. The core of who we are remains. Sometimes it has difficulty expressing itself. Linda's memories are still there. It's the connections that won't let her access those memories. Sometimes something triggers and suddenly she accesses it. And it may be gone in an instant. But the essence of the person is not threatened by aging. Aging has the potential to fulfill the image of God more fully, growing into his likeness. The fact that we are made in the image of God, and every person is, should be the affirmation that informs how we treat one another. That we treat one another with inherent worth and dignity, no matter who they are, what they have done or not done, what they look like, what they can produce or not produce. Every human being bears the image of God deep within, however covered over it may be. And one of the Wesleyan emphasis is what's called prevenient grace, or Wesley called it more often preventing grace. Grace that prevents the total destruction of the image of God in another. And the grace that always gets there before we do. So if you go into the nursing home or the memory care unit thinking, well, I'll take God here, you'll be surprised. God's been there wondering when you were going to show him. You'll meet God. You'll meet God in the one whom you think you might have come to reveal God. Okay, now the incarnation is God's presence and claim upon human existence. In 1 John 14, the Word became flesh and made his home among us, or one way, pitched his tent among us. We have seen his glory, glory like that of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. God has entered human flesh in Jesus of Nazareth, who was born, grew to maturity, lived, and died. I meant to look this up and forgot. What was the life expectancy in the time of Jesus? Does anybody know?
35.
35. Thank you, Jay. We say Jesus died at age 33 as a young man. Jesus was an elderly man in his time. He had reached the level of life expectancy of his time. Yes, God understands aging. God understands dementia. Even God understands the absence of God. My God, why have you forsaken me? God understands, because God has experienced the whole of human existence in all of its vulnerabilities, sufferings. You know, it's a heresy to so emphasize the divinity of Jesus that we assume he didn't suffer, or that his suffering was pretense. He only pretended to suffer. No, he suffered. He died. He was anguished in his death. He felt cut off. He felt loneliness. Jesus is the embodiment of the presence of God. So God understands all of human experience. Carlyle Marney tells the story of seeing scribbled on the bathroom wall the graffiti, "God has cancer." Marney said, "I thought that was being sacrilegious until I thought, no, that's probably the most profound theological thing I've read recently. God does have cancer, and he'll have cancer until cancer is eradicated." God has entered into all of the human experience. Now, we've cleaned that story up to where we've removed the humanity of Jesus' suffering, even his birth. He understands poverty. He was born homeless because of a government's taxation policy. Wonder if that's not contemporary. According to Matthew, he spent his first 2 years as an immigrant in Egypt. Wonder if he was documented. He grew up in a working-class family. Some contend his father died when he was young. We don't know. He was executed as a criminal. He lives on death row. One of my visits to death row in Tennessee, one of the prisoners scribbled on the blackboard an image of Jesus. Underneath were written these words: "He lives on death row." He died. He was executed. Guilty of another culture's capital offense. That's who God is. There's no night so dark but what God is there. There is no stable so barren but what God is there. There is no place so far off but what God is there. And there is no one so aged but what God is there. Aging with, in place with. And God has claimed the human personality as the vehicle of divine presence. What God did in Jesus of Nazareth, God seeks to do in all of us. That is to birth God's presence. And God has chosen human personality as a primary vehicle of God's presence with other humans and with the world. We are extensions of the incarnation in Jesus Christ. We have been baptized into Christ's body, and therefore we have become the body of Christ as the church. Our identity then belongs in Him. Implications: God shares the aging process with us. God's more real to me now than He was even when I was in Oak Ridge. I know more about what it means to be human now than I knew at 43 to 48. God has given me the chance to learn some patience that I like. God has given me the opportunity to learn to love without reciprocity, without expecting anything in return. God has given me the opportunity to appreciate the simple things, like a smile, a momentary twinkle in the eye, a fleeting moment of recognition, a warm clasp of the hand. I become more human. Got a long way to go, too. I've learned that being is what it's all about. Not doing, not knowing, not having. Being. Just being with one another. Linda is still being with me. The incarnation presence is a model for our relationships with one another. All of us have gifts to be received and celebrated. And the goal is to enter the life and the world of the other in such a way that we can connect with that person, to bring out their gifts. It's the great challenge of people dealing with dementia, is to enter their world. There used to be, I'll show you a video. It was developed by, this whole approach was developed by Naomi Feil, a social worker. She's still living, I think she's 88 now. But Naomi Feil, it used to be in the 70s and 80s, that the way you dealt with people with dementia is called reality orientation. If they said, well, my mama came today, your response was, no, your mother's been dead for 10 years. Or it's Christmas. No, it's July the 15th. You oriented them. That's orienting them toward our world. Naomi Feil says, no, you orient them toward their world. You validate their world and put them in touch with their world and the world beyond. Watch this video, both from the perspective that's focused on dealing with persons with dementia, but think about it in terms of what the incarnation means. Even think about it, I think Naomi Feil is the Christ figure in this video, but what are its implications for how we deal with each other and what it means to be human?